Ophelia, welcome to the Slice Pod, where we uncover the stories of fresh emerging managers across the early stage venture landscape. Previously, you were a partner at Local Globe, and now you lead Tiny VC, where you invest 150 to 200K checks in ambitious and unique technology startups and funds as early as possible across Europe. Since 2017, let's start where we always do, which is how did we get here? Did you always know that you were going to manage a fund one day? Was that always the goal?
Does anybody ever say yes to that question? I'd really love to meet them. That would have saved a lot of time. I knew you were going to ask this question, so I went back into my WhatsApps so I could be specific about the date. This is a Be Real moment. It's May 2021. I get this text from Andy Chung, who is my now partner at Tiny VC. I was at Local Globe at the time. And it's a one-liner. Would you join Tiny full-time? Such an Andy Chung move. and actually it was so out of the blue, but I had this strong intuition. I called him back immediately, and without knowing what the nature of working together full-time would be, and I suspect neither did he at that time, but I just knew three things, I suppose. I knew that I believed in the people. I believed in Philip and Andy. They were super early at Angel List. They were super good humans. I believed in the strategy. I had the privilege of having the LP insider look because Tiny is in the Basecamp portfolio. Basecamp is the fund of fund that Saul and Robin, client at Local Globe, run. And I just knew that it was working, despite how bizarrely different it was to the traditional model of venture. And I guess I believed in myself somewhat to be able to step up to the challenge. I remember at the time, quite a few people were puzzled by the move. I got a lot of questions asking, but why did you leave? And I still get asked that sometimes today. I think leave is just not the right verb. Leave implies that you're running away from something bad. But really, I was running towards something good, cool, different. It felt like a specific time of my life that I could take such an extreme risk. No kids, no mortgage, still really early in my venture career. It felt like the time to swing for the fences. So I did.
I love it. And you're touching on something that it's probably even more acute in the geography you're based in, which is Europe. Tiny is indeed a very different thesis on early stage venture, especially compared to Local Globe, which is one of the big names, one of what you would call a tier one, especially in London and across the UK. What makes it so different?
I'll start with an anecdote. So one of our larger LPs is Roger Ehrenberg of IA Ventures, and someone I hugely respect. I think someone who's hugely respected in the industry, known for having one of the most concentrated portfolios out there. I think he has 10 to 20 companies per fund. Early and Wise, early in a bunch of these companies, that has done incredibly well for his own LPs. And then you take Tiny. In Fund 3, we're targeting 300 companies. Fund 2, we had about 180. And I met with Roger in New York, and I just said, Roger, why? You run the most concentrated portfolio. You're invested in the least concentrated. How does this make any sense for you? And I just loved what he said to me. He said, look, I don't claim to corner the market on how to make money. And all I can say is what you're doing, it works. The numbers are good. So I'm interested. I think there are so many different ways to play this game. And the most important thing is to find the style that suits you. And maybe another quote would be, the opposite of a great truth is another great truth. The fact that the Local Globe model works does not mean that the Tiny model won't work. In fact, I think they're highly complementary. I think what's challenging is to do something in the middle. But in the savannah where you have the wildebeest, you don't necessarily want to go and be another wildebeest. You could be the oxpecker, and then the whole ecosystem is richer for it.
It's something we hear quite a bit. And it's true, there is not only one way to make money in venture. There is several different ways. 300 companies as a target, 250, you say? Like, that's a huge portfolio. I think probably only Kima in Europe kind of gets to that kind of number. Was it hard to sell to LPs this idea of such a large portfolio of such tiny positions? I'm sure that everybody was like, how are you going to return the fund with like, 0.3% ownership or something?
Yeah, it was hard. I'm trying to think back to that year. Very successfully did like a brain wipe. The fundraising took a year, maybe just over. And in the course of that year, very quickly at the beginning, the market fell off a cliff. So we had a bunch of £5 million commitments that collapsed into $1 million. So it's not even £1 million, right? So from a relative position of velocity, we were suddenly finding ourselves quite set back somewhat. We also had SVB just a few weeks before the fund was closing. But we also had two cold LinkedIn messages from LPs, one of which turned out to be our second largest LP via cold LinkedIn DM, and the other one turned out to be a top 20 LP. So the lessons learned are, I think, twofold. It's not really about convincing LPs, in my experience, of a different religion. I've never successfully done that with data or with narrative, because people can draw what they want from it. And we do have good numbers in both the previous fund. It's just purely, I think, a top of funnel numbers game. Like, more conversations is more, because you can't control the conversion rate directly. Speaking to Ophelia Brown at Blossom at some point when I was pretty low just gave me a much needed shot of energy, because she's super impressive. She raised 430 million as a solo GP. She said she had something like 800 prospects and drilled those down into a handful of single digit meaningful LPs. She took every single meeting in person. I think we had north of 1,000 conversations, and that ended up being over 100 LPs. So maybe the other meta lesson is a lot of this journey. It's like there's the Navy, and now you're rowing in your little rowboat made of wood with all the supplies you can carry for a short while. You're rowing in the other direction, and you're navigating by compass and maybe starlight. If you don't have a means of sustaining yourself mentally and that self-propulsion, then it's just very hard to get there.
What was it? Friends, other managers, partners? How did you keep it straight?
Well, I tried to sprint at it, and that definitely didn't work. So the approach in the second part was the better learned response, and it is all of the above. I think this is why I have so much admiration for all of the solos out there. I'm so privileged to have a team. We're four in the partnership, and then we have three team members who joined later. And the beauty of having a team is you get to do more of what you love and less of what you're bad at, because everybody is good at different things. And then you cover each other's blind spots. Our team is very, very diverse. If you look at all the funds out there, we have 2 female and 2 male partners. The team is pretty much half split evenly gender-wise. Age-wise, we have a huge range of cultural backgrounds and professional experiences. We're really not the early benchmark boys team, and I think we're the stronger for it because it allows us to have this broader peripheral vision. The partnership thing is a really unique beast. I'm still learning. I will continue to learn how to be a good partner to my partners. If you think about it, there are just not that many other relationships in your life which are so high stakes, have such longevity, and have such responsibility. I think it's more in the domain of Esther Perel than any kind of organizational behavioral science.
What's the competitive landscape for you guys? Because you're very different, and like we said, there is not that many tinies out there. Are you ever at odds with the other funds that are trying to do what you're trying to do, maybe on the fundraising side or on the capital deployment perspective? Or is it a greenfield?
I think Tiny Strategy is exactly designed to allow us to play well and excel in an ever more competitive environment. When we started in 2017, this is before I joined, the landscape was a lot less competitive. There were just not that many angels that were good to rub together. So it was just your list of a dozen. And it's become more competitive since, but I think the better for it because there's so much choice, but there's also so much more opportunity. And that's where a hyper early flexible check strategy plays really well. Hyper early because in the earlier stages, there is still a lack of risk capital compared to later stage. And flexible check means, yeah, I can have a standard check size, but for the right company, we will still go down because we'd rather be a small part of something big than not a part of it at all.
I'll challenge you a little bit on this because people say that, and you primarily invest in Europe, founders with global ambition, but primarily in Europe. And the narrative around Europe is that it's a small market, doesn't have the talent, growth is slow and sluggish, you don't get to big outcomes. What do you say to that? Is it true?
As long as people believe that, then that's great for us because there will be more opportunities for us. I mean, I'm kidding. I'm not saying Europe isn't without its problems. The reality of different countries, lots of different borders, lots of different languages, different currencies even. But I'll say, what does it take to have growth? There's capital and then there's talent. From a capital point of view, since 2019, all the tier one US funds have their offices here. If they don't, they're sending people here once a week. Just this week, I met with Lux Capital, Box Group, a lot of the emerging managers are visiting, and they all do this on a monthly basis at least. So it's kind of even as a playing field from that perspective. From a talent point of view, I'd say not only do we graduate great technical talent and other kinds of talent without huge burden of financial debt, we also are great at attracting talent. The CEOs of some of our best performing companies, like Alex Kendall at Wave, he was here from New Zealand on a visa. There's countless other examples of that because we do have great welfare state, great stable regimes comparatively. There's a particularly interesting cluster in the kind of AI computational biology space around King's Cross because we have the Alan Turing Institute is inside Francis Crick. We have Meta, we have DeepMind, all just within walking distance of each other. We have UCL as well. So it's this Schelling point of very specialized talent, which is actually causing a lot of the computational biology startups that we come into contact with to say they are going to build their companies here, not elsewhere. Maybe the challenge is compared to the US, where there is basically 2 centers of technical excellence, Stanford, MIT. Here we have loads of them, but they're a lot more distributed. So when it comes to robotics, there's Bristol, there's ETH Zurich, there's also Munich, and you have to fly between them. So maybe the real question is, how can we take advantage of the benefits of this more equal distribution, but also capture the compounding effect of the density? Like that is the reason for Silicon Valley's success. Some people say it's the reason that the Renaissance kicked off, the concentration of capital and talent in Florence.
Tiny, you're going to be the Medici, trying to get all the cool founders move to King's Cross and start a company. Well, in this distributed landscape, you talked about geographical barriers. It's very uncommon for a founder that is just starting a company, maybe fresh out of school, to jump on a plane and go to London and try and meet a VC in a coffee shop. How do they find out about you? How do you find out about them? Are you on planes most of your week, going to all the different European hubs, trying to schedule in person with these founders? It's a very small market, but it's a very big market, geographically speaking. And that density is not there. It's hard to kind of get them all in one place. It's hard to have an event and then you have like 80% of the population in one place, as you would in Silicon Valley, for example.
Tiny was born out of constraints. We've evolved to have a larger footprint than you would expect. I'll give you an example. When Tiny was born, 2017, Philip and Andy were actually full-time at AngelList. So the Tiny thing was just the side hustle. And so that's where a small check, non-leading strategy can be done. It's much more difficult to be a lead investor in the, 9 to 7 hours. They were always in two places. Andy was always based in London. Philip was based in Berlin. So we were doing everything on Zoom before COVID, which is when the rest of the world moved to Zoom, and not flying. So our strategy didn't involve having to do these quite expensive, time-consuming things. I think you can get away with a lot more of this as a small check follow investor. And then there's the strategy itself. So because we invest very rapidly, we have a big portfolio, which means we have a big network of talent who know Tiny, have first-hand experience of working with us, often typically have good things to say about their interactions with us. We also have a very big LP base, most of whom are active in the ecosystem. So whether it's operators, founders, other investors, 20% of the LPs in Fund 3 are actually Tiny founders. So it's a sign of product market fit. All of these people are our champions. And that's where we are hearing about companies, about people, and about the evolution of a deal as it goes from first meeting through to someone's term sheet. It's a distributed brain trust of information that allows us to see a lot more while having a really small team, which is the key, because the moment that you scale your footprint through having to hire headcount, then your fixed costs go up as a manager, which just pushes you to have to raise a bigger fund. And we always knew that we wanted our fund size to be decoupled from the cost.
Do you think it's always going to stay tiny?
My joke to the team is that tiny is a 4-letter word, so we could IPO with it. But no, I think tiny is a feeling for us. We just redid our values. There's different components, but the shorthand internally is staying tiny and staying tiny means serving founders, choosing leverage through scale, making it great, and these different things. So we will always stay tiny in that sense, I hope.
And I'm assuming fund size as well, because like 300 companies with a team of 4, it's probably approaching capacity. Do you think that you could do 1,200 companies with a team of like 8? Is that scalable, or do you even need to do that? Is there even that many good opportunities in Europe, or have you thought about branching out to other markets?
Yeah, and I think it's so important to ask yourself this question every fund. Every fund is a kind of new birthing moment, and there's no reason that you should have to carry over things and structures and people from fund to fund. I think it's better to work backwards from the team's shared mission. We believe that technology is a lever for change, and venture is the way that you fund some of these breakthrough technologies. It always has been. We're kind of on a mission to change how venture is done so that we can drive the rate of progress of society through technology. I think we all agree that there are more great ideas out there than less. At the very earliest stages, still this gap in capital. The challenge is bridging the capital to the talent still. So we're on a mission to try and plug that gap and make sure that all the great potential founders out there can have a shot. Obviously, you don't just jump from A to Z immediately. There's a real argument for sensible scaling along the way. And that's what we've always done through each fund. Fund 1 was just around 70 companies. Fund 2 was about 180 companies. Fund 3, 300 companies. Each time we have to build a new piece of infrastructure, retool some of the back end, rethink some of how we're deploying and the strategy so that we can grow into the size. We're really motivated to figure out how could we deliver that, and really open-minded towards what does that modality look like. We've started experimenting in Fund 3. We'll continue pushing on that experiment in Fund 4 with more scalable ways to deploy. We call this the Collective Partner Program, and it's where we have identified specialists. They already know how to invest. We're not saying we're training them. For whatever reason, either it's capital constraints or they want to build a track record for raising their fund, or they just like us and like to work with us. We let them deploy a set pool of capital from the fund, subject to the internal IC. And this lets us cover off areas of specialism, specific geographies. I think even better than having someone on the core team who would need to fly there, because these areas of interest actually come in and out of fashion. Defense, computational biology, space, these are all trendy now, but next year it will be different. So that strategy has actually led to one or two of our more exciting investments. Practica.ai, where we invested in the pre-seed in February, and I think quite soon after, 2 months after or so, Blossom led a large Series A in. That was actually via a collective partner. So we've got these early proof points that it can work.
What I'm hearing is that you're very much a community play, both in terms of like the LP set, the overall reputation and size of the portfolio, the network of networks within the founders within that portfolio. You're saying, and you mentioned it a couple of times, that there is a lack of risk capital at the early stages. I'm assuming that's because of this inertia of traditional venture funds being pushed to bigger and bigger sizes in order to support larger cost bases in terms of teams and everything else. Leaving this sort of open space where angels alone cannot fill, and here comes Tiny and a bunch of other folks. Who else in Europe does what you do and sort of like fills this space? I'm assuming that, well, I know, I'm not just assuming, but like it's a collaborative game, so it's not a matter of like, winning over someone else. And like you were saying, like, it's such a huge market that you may be specializing in something or something else. So the overlap is tiny, for lack of a better word. But also, it's when you do overlap, it probably creates even more value. What are the other emerging fund managers, micro funds, institutional angels that are doing a good job, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would just pull up one of my many WhatsApp groups now for emerging managers, because there is just too many to count, and that is a good thing. And we formed all these support groups, help groups, where I'm going to steal this quote from Picasso via Sarah Drinkwater. We were just talking about it on Monday, where when artists get together, they discuss, where do you buy cheap turpentine? Right? We're in these groups discussing, what are you paying for your AR or your fund manager, which lawyer to use which notary to use in Paris. This is just so good for all the founders out there, and for LPs, I would say, because there's just now so much more choice. And what every founder needs is different. Now there's going to be more likely someone out there for that founder that really is their style. Broadly, I would say you see stage specialists emerging. So, for example, Deck Kelly, it's pre-seed, very generalist, small checks, big portfolio. You might have some thematic expert emerging. So the Luna folks, super deep tech. There's First Momentum in Germany, near Munich, very frontier technology again, Stefano Bernardi at Unruly. And then there's geo specialists. So you have Sondo in Norway. And then the sum total of this is, as you say, is like the fantastic village of people who can support a founder in all of the different ways, with a much richer diversity of opinion than just the one lead investor plus a couple of angels.
You mentioned WhatsApp. a couple of times. We all know the European fascination with WhatsApp. And I know you have built product to support the portfolio and internal operations at Tiny. And this is kind of what Andy is doing with his kind of like new venture, taking that set of tools and making it available for more angel investors, emerging managers, and such. What are the tools of the job? How do you keep all your ducks in a row? It's a big portfolio. It's a tiny team. It's probably a lot of work. And is it really all done on WhatsApp? Is it all voice notes, like frantically, like sharing voice notes with all the people? Like, how does it work?
Voice notes is one of my favorite modalities with my partner Philip, but Andy hates them. So thank you for talking about this because it is the 90% of the iceberg, I will say, that very quickly weighs you down. You think you don't need processes until you need them. And by that point, you have a large portfolio. And this is across all funds, by the way. The new software Airtable, Notion, they popped up in recent years, relatively speaking. And funds like Tiny were lucky enough to be around to take advantage and leapfrog with the innovation. So Tiny 1 and 2, it was Angel List on the back end and this crazy Airtable, basically a database, which kept all of the financial information, all of the people information. It was like a mapping of Andy's brain onto a database. And we eventually quickly outgrew that. So affectionately, I call this Tiny AI. If we were to raise as an AI company, we should probably do a meme deck and see and give it a go. It's the platform that Andy has built. Essentially, it like does the job of maybe a VC intern, or it's automating a lot of the workflows and just allowing me to spend more time doing what I hopefully am better at, which is supporting founders on the phone, meeting people. So there's a WhatsApp or an email interface. I can just forward all of my deals, the decks, any links, LinkedIn, pitch, Notion, whatever, to it. It ingests all of that and captures it in a single place. Let's call it Deal CRM. It then auto enriches that information. So just from one DocSend link, it can generate a smart summary. It will pull LinkedIn profiles from the internet. It will tell me where this company is. It actually has started searching for competitor companies. This saves me a bunch of time and it allows me to share much more easily with my co-investors and angels, which again is just supercharging something I'm doing naturally. But if you leave it to the human, it's a very imperfect process with a lot of recency bias. I'm just sending it to whoever sent me a thing recently, but that's not really the best person to send that deal to necessarily. So we're building these features that, based on your co-investment history, because we have all the cap tables, it will start to auto-suggest who is actually the best person to send this. In Q1 this year, Nemo, we call it Nemo, processed 710, I think, decks. And then it facilitated over 30 investor introductions off the back of the sharing of these decks. So these are all the little things that we're tracking to see if we are being the collaborative co-investors that we say we are.
We're a big fan of Nemo here at Slice. Son and I use it on a daily basis. But I have to say, Tiny AI, it's a better name for it. So, Andy, I know you're listening. Maybe a rebrand is of order. I'm just saying. It's a very cute name. Very cute name. I like it. Prior to this, you were a local club, which is a behemoth in your geo, right? And now you're an emerging manager at a tiny fund with a tiny budget, a tiny team. What was the biggest difference transitioning from what you called it, like, the warship to the transatlantic to the tiny raft? What sort of advice could you give to like people that are considering something like that, making a move of that scale?
Yeah. I'm super grateful for my experience at Local Globe. It prepared me in many ways for doing something like Tiny. That was my first role in venture. And it's an incredibly great group of people to learn that from. I was really lucky to be working very closely with Saul as well at the time across the huge portfolio of projects that he has going on, from incubating companies to investing to fundraising to fund management to supporting government on specialist topics. So that really gave me some of the exposure that's very hard to come by on the fund management side if you're an early stage investor. Usually you're just put in a corner and told to source deals. Most people launch an emerging fund starting out in their career as an investor, but the role of fund managing is so different. It's so much more than just investing. And there's no real way to learn that other than by doing it. It's often you're protected from that work by the managing partner at a more traditional fund. In that work is contained things like the ops strategy and the regulatory strategy, the compliance strategy, the fund setup, the bank accounts, the service providers, all of these things that there is really no playbook for. But I guess that's why I'm very grateful that there are so many more emerging managers out there now, because that is the information pool of practitioners who are all at the coalface, trying and learning and sharing best practice as we go. And maybe the second piece of advice is it is just about self-motivation, knowing how to pick yourself up and get yourself out of bed, because investing, the returns come at the end of many, many, many years. So to be purely motivated by that would make your life very hard. The only things you can control are the inputs. So you must be someone who just loves doing this job, meeting amazing people, learning about new topics, always feeling like the dumbest person in the room, learning how to learn quickly, selling, core part of the job.
Find your tribe, find your tiny tribe, first and foremost. Like, it's a people business at the end of the day. How can people get in touch with you? Do you have an AI bot that they submit their pitches to? Do you even welcome a cold outreach, whether it's an LP or a founder? Does it have to be a warm intro? What's the best way to reach out to Tiny and to reach out to you?
You know, two of the best things that happened to Tiny came via cold outreach. So rare. Our best performing investment, which is the 600x in Fund 2, that was a cold inbound email. And as I said earlier, our second largest LP came in via cold LinkedIn DMs. I'm very easy to find. I'm o@tiny.vc. Always welcome an email. Thoughtful emails, tailored emails are always nicer than the ones where you know it's going to 10 people.
As we draw to a close, we sort of have our signature question, which is, as we're going to hang up the phone and you're going to get back to your backlog of email on a Friday evening, you're going to be thinking, darn it, I prepared to talk about this thing for the whole week and Fabry didn't ask it to me. What is that thing? What do you want to share with the world that we haven't touched on yet?
This is the right time to shout out to all my fellow emerging managers out there, because the breakaway velocity that you need in this industry to start something new and to jump ship is phenomenal. All of the incentive structures are designed to keep you against doing that, because you carry VES over a very long period of time and no one will back someone without that track record of having done it. What I have noticed about my peers is I don't think they would be doing anything else. Like, you couldn't pay us not to do it. If you gave us $1 billion, what would we do? We'd probably just get back to work deploying those $1 billion into early stage startups.
I 100% agree with it. Here in LA on the 10 freeway, passing downtown, there is a giant billboard that every week shows the lottery jackpot. And every time I drive by, I think that'd be nice. It could be like 5 or 6 funds that I could deploy. Maybe I should buy a ticket. Totally feel you. Ophelia, this was great. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think that you bring a very interesting perspective to the table. I feel Tiny is already an institution, even though some people may say it's on a way to become one. But having been a founder that was part of the Tiny first portfolio and having met Andy trying to place a 50K check at an event and like seeing how far this platform has come and how much intention has gone into building it and how much you guys represent for your local market, not just for the founders, but also for the other managers out there. You are a role model. And I can't think of a better person to embody the Tiny brand for decades to come. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing all of the little tidbits of information that we got to learn from you tonight.
Oh, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for making it feel so easy to do it.